How much of the time you spend on your aquarium every week is actually doing nothing for the tank? Probably more than half. Most of the maintenance people grind through is habit, not need. And the guys whose tanks always look effortless are not working harder. They figured out which corners to cut, and which 10-second moves make the weekly slog disappear. 30 years keeping fish, about 15 of them running my own shop, and I wasted a good chunk of the early ones doing maintenance the long way, because that is how I was taught. Nobody sat me down and said half of this is theater. These are 15 shortcuts I wish somebody had handed me 20 years earlier, real ones that save real time, without cutting the corners that actually matter to the fish. And stay with me to the end, because the last one is not a trick at all. It is the single habit that quietly turns a 2-hour weekend chore into a 15-minute one, and almost nobody does it. You know the feeling. It is Saturday. You told yourself you would spend 20 minutes on the tank, and an hour and a half later you are still hunched over a bucket with a wet sleeve, wondering how a hobby that is supposed to relax you turned into a part-time job. Everybody who has kept a tank for a while has lived that exact afternoon. Let me give you the first shortcut that ends it. Stop vacuuming the whole gravel bed. When you gravel vac, which just means running a siphon over the substrate to pull out waste, most people drag it slowly across every square inch of the tank like they are mowing a lawn. You do not need to. Detritus, that brown sludge of fish waste and leftover food, does not spread out evenly. It collects in dead spots, the corners, the areas behind the wood and rock, the low-flow zones where the current cannot push it around. The open swimming lanes in the middle stay nearly clean because the fish and the flow keep them stirred up. Hit the dirty spots, skip the clean ones, and you are done in a third of the time with the same result. I spent years methodically vacuuming every inch out of some sense of duty. My old mentor, the guy who taught me you are keeping water and not fish, watched me do it once and asked why I was cleaning gravel that was already clean. I did not have a good answer. There is a real reason to leave the clean areas alone too. If you are running a planted tank, the substrate is holding nutrients and beneficial bacteria in the top layer, and deep vacuuming the whole bed every week strips that out and disturbs the roots. So you are not just wasting time on the clean zones, you are actively working against the tank. Hit the 3 or 4 dirty spots, which on most tanks is maybe a quarter of the floor, and let the rest be. Turn your filter off before you feed. This one sounds too small to matter, and it changes your whole week. When the filter is running, that suction at the intake pulls a chunk of the flake or pellets straight up and into the filter before the fish ever get to it. That food rots in there, fouls your media, and clogs the flow, which means more filter cleanings and more waste in the water. Flip the filter off, feed, give the fish 2 or 3 minutes to actually eat, then turn it back on. The food stays down in the tank where the mouths are. You end up feeding less because less is getting wasted, and you clean the filter less often because you stopped feeding it. Every animal in there eats better, and you do less work. That is the whole trade, and there is a knock-on benefit most people miss. Because the food is not vanishing into the filter, you can actually see how much the fish eat in a couple of minutes, so you stop overfeeding, and overfeeding is behind more cloudy water and algae than almost anything else. In the years I ran the store, the single most common cause of a wrecked tank walking through my door was somebody who thought they were feeding a normal amount while half of it was rotting where they could not see it. Killing the filter suction at feeding time quietly fixes both problems at once. Pre-age your water, change water instead of doing it live. This is the setup that changed my routine more than anything on this list. Get a food-safe lidded container. A clean trash can works. Fill it with your change water. Drop in a cheap heater and a small power head or air pump to keep it moving, and add your dechlorinator, the water conditioner that neutralizes the chlorine in tap water so it does not kill your bacteria and burn your fish. Now it just sits there, warm and ready. When water change day comes, you are not standing at the sink matching temperature and waiting. You walk up to a can of perfect water and pump it in. A 20-gallon change on a Saturday goes from a 15-minute production to about 3 minutes of pumping. And a quick note on the equipment. Everything in this hobby runs on electricity sitting inches from water. So whatever you plug in near that can or the tank, run the cord in a drip loop, meaning let it hang down below the outlet so water drips off the bottom instead of running back into the socket, and put it on a GFCI outlet, the kind with the little test and reset buttons. That is not optional around water. You can match your refill temperature by feel instead of chasing a thermometer. Run the tap until the water coming out feels the same as the tank water on the inside of your wrist, the way you would check a baby bottle, and you can refill straight from a hose with no measuring at all. Your wrist is more sensitive than you think. It will catch a difference of a couple degrees easy. I lived by a thermometer for years, until an old breeder at a club showed me he had not touched one in a decade. He just used his wrist and never lost a fish to a temperature swing. One honest caveat: this is for hardy community fish. If you keep sensitive shrimp or wild-caught fish that hate any swing, keep using the thermometer, because their tolerance is a lot tighter than a guppy's. And if your tap runs cold in winter, remember the water coming out of the wall can be 20 degrees colder in January than it was in July, so your wrist matters even more in the cold months. That is exactly when people shock fish by refilling too cold without noticing. Keep a magnet scraper stuck to the front glass at all times. A magnet scraper is two magnets, one inside the tank and one outside, that you slide around to wipe algae off the glass without ever getting your hands wet. Most people keep it in a drawer, pull it out once a month, and face a full green scrub down. Leave it parked on the glass instead, and every time you walk by you give it one 10-second swipe. The algae never gets a foothold, so you never do the big scrub again. It is the difference between wiping a counter every day and letting it go for a month. And the math on it is real. A monthly green scrub down is 15 or 20 minutes of elbow work, 12 times a year, call it 4 hours. The daily 10-second swipe adds up to under an hour over the same year, and the glass never actually looks dirty in between. One thing to watch: if you keep a tank on hard water, the kind of high mineral tap you get across a lot of the Southwest, get a scraper rated for it or one with a blade attachment, because that hard green spot algae laughs at a soft pad. On soft water, a plain felt magnet is plenty. Feed frozen food as a frozen chunk. If you feed frozen bloodworms or brine shrimp, that little cube from the blister pack, stop thawing it in a cup of water first. That whole routine of melting it, straining it, and pouring it in is wasted effort. Just drop the frozen cube straight into a corner of the tank, ideally in some flow, and let the fish pick at it as it slowly melts. Zero prep, zero mess, and the fish get a slow trickle of food instead of a dumped cloud. The only time to thaw first is if you have got tiny fish or shrimp that cannot handle a big chunk, then you break it up. Otherwise, cube in, done. There is a reason the slow melt is actually better and not just lazier. When you thaw and dump a cloud of tiny bloodworms all at once, a lot of it drifts past the fish, settles, and rots. A cube melting in the current releases the food gradually right where the fish are already staged waiting for it, so more of it gets eaten, and less of it becomes waste you have to clean up later. Faster for you, cleaner for the tank. If this is helping, go ahead and subscribe. We have got more of these coming. Quarantine new plants in a bucket before they ever touch your tank. Every new plant is a potential Trojan horse. It can carry pest snail eggs, hitchhiking bugs, even a bit of algae you do not want. People find this out when a single new plant turns into a snail infestation 2 months later, and then they are dumping chemicals in the whole tank trying to fix it. Skip all of that. Float or sit the new plants in a bucket of dechlorinated water for a week or so before you plant them, and watch what shows up. Pest snails will appear on the bucket wall where you can just wipe them off. You keep the problem in the bucket instead of chasing it around your display for months. And while we are on it, if you ever do end up overrun with snails or extra plants, never dump them in a creek, a pond, or a storm drain. It is illegal in most states, and it is exactly how invasive species get loose and wreck a waterway. Give the extras to a fish club or throw them in the trash, but the wild is not an option. Put your light on a timer and stop thinking about it. This is the one piece of automation that pays off every single day. Algae grows on light, and the biggest algae trigger is an inconsistent photoperiod, meaning the number of hours your light is on jumping around because you turn it on and off by hand and forget. A $5 outlet timer fixes it forever. Set the light for a steady 6 to 8 hours a day, about the length of a work shift, and walk away. Same hours every day, the algae never gets the long exposure it needs to take over. The plants get a predictable rhythm, and you never think about it again. Leave your air pump running 24 hours a day. That one you do not put on a timer. But the light, set it once and forget it exists. 2 things worth knowing here. First, more light is not better. A longer photoperiod does not grow your plants faster past a point. It just feeds algae. So resist the urge to run the light 10 or 12 hours because it looks nice. Second, keep the tank out of direct sunlight from a window, because the sun is a photoperiod you cannot control, and it will green your water no matter how good your timer is. A $5 timer plus a spot out of the sun does more to prevent algae than any bottle of algae remover the store will sell you, and it does it for years with zero effort after the one time you set it. Replant your trimmings instead of buying more plants. When your stem plants get tall and you trim the tops off, do not throw those cuttings away. That cut top is a brand new plant. Push the trimmed end down into the substrate a couple inches, about knuckle deep, and it roots and grows on its own. Free plants, a fuller tank, and no trip to the store. In a year of trimming and replanting, I have filled entire tanks from a single starter bunch without spending another dollar. My wife, who calls the fish room the swamp and has never tested a drop of water in her life, has asked more than once why I keep buying plants when the tanks are already jungles. I have stopped trying to explain that I do not. This only works on stem plants, the kind with a clear stalk you can cut and replant, like most of the fast growers people start with. It does not work the same way on a rosette plant like an Amazon sword or an Anubis, where you propagate off the roots or rhizome instead, so do not go hacking the top off one of those expecting a new plant. But for the stem stuff that makes up most beginner tanks, every trim is free inventory. Keep your siphon hose primed and stored full of water. If you use a plain gravel vac and hose to drain your tank, the most annoying part is getting the siphon started, all that shaking or pumping to get the water flowing. The fix is stupidly simple. When you finish a water change, kink or cap both ends of the hose while it is still full and store it exactly like that. Next time, you just drop the full hose in, unkink it, and it starts flowing on the first try because the water is already sitting in the tube doing the work for you. It turns a 5-minute wrestling match into one flick. Small thing, but it is the small annoyances that make people skip water changes. And skip changes are what actually hurt a tank. Wipe the outside glass and the lid with a plain damp cloth, and keep every spray cleaner far away from the tank. This is a safety one, not just a time one. Those aerosol glass cleaners and all-purpose sprays put a fine mist in the air that drifts right onto the water surface and dissolves in, and the ammonia and other chemicals in them can wipe out a tank. I have seen it happen. Somebody cleans a window near the tank and loses fish that night with no idea why. A damp microfiber rag does the whole job on the outside glass, and the lid faster than spraying and wiping anyway, and it never puts anything dangerous near the water. No bottle required. Batch all your maintenance into one day, and then leave the tank alone. A stable, established tank does not want you fiddling with it every day. It wants to be left in a rhythm. The people who tinker constantly, a little water out here, a scrape there, a dose whenever they walk by, are usually the ones with the least stable tanks, because every little change nudges the balance. Pick one day, do your water change, your glass, your spot cleaning, all of it in one pass, and then keep your hands out for the rest of the week. You save all the scattered little chores that add up to hours, and the tank actually runs more stable because you stop disturbing it. This is the same idea as consistency over intensity that I keep coming back to. Do the right thing on a schedule and stop reacting to every little thing you notice. Think about the time this gives back. Somebody who touches the tank a little every day, 10 minutes here, 5 there, easily burns an hour or more a week on scattered fiddling, and the tank is no better for it. One focused 20-minute session on a set day does the same real work and hands you the rest of the week back. It also makes life easier when you travel, because a tank built around one weekly touch does not panic if you are gone for 6 days, where a tank you have trained yourself to fuss with daily starts to feel neglected the moment you leave town. Pre-measure your dose caps into a weekly pill organizer. If you dose ferts, that is liquid plant fertilizer, or any regular additive, stop standing there every week rereading the bottle and doing the math on how much goes in. Once a month, sit down and pre-measure each week's dose into the compartments of a cheap 7-day pill organizer. Then on dosing day, you just dump the compartment in and move on. No bottle, no cap, no math. It sounds almost too simple, but taking the thinking out of a weekly task is exactly what stops you from skipping it. Label which organizer is which if you dose more than one thing, because pouring the wrong additive is a bad afternoon. I will own that one. Early on, I kept 2 unlabeled dosing bottles that looked identical, and dosed a fertilizer where a different additive was supposed to go, and spent the next day doing damage control water changes on a tank that did not need any of it. 30 seconds of labeling would have saved me the whole mess. Keep a cheap turkey baster right next to the tank. This is the single most used tool in my fish room, and it costs about $2. That plastic bulb baster from the kitchen aisle is perfect for spot cleaning. You see a clump of waste in a corner, or a bit of gunk settled on the wood. You grab the baster, suck it right up in 10 seconds, and you are done. No hauling out the siphon and the bucket for one dirty spot. You can also use it to blast debris off plants and decor so the filter can carry it away. It turns a dozen tiny cleanups that you would otherwise ignore or turn into full productions into 10-second grabs. My reef-keeping brother-in-law spends a fortune on fancy dosing gear and gadgets, and the tool I reach for most is a turkey baster my wife retired from the kitchen. I try not to bring that up at holidays. Now the last one, the habit I promised, the one that quietly cuts a 2-hour chore down to 15 minutes. Stop cleaning your filter on the calendar and start cleaning it on the flow. Here is why this is the big one. Most people clean their filter every 2 weeks or every month because that is what feels responsible. And every time they do, they scrub or rinse the media, that sponge and ceramic and floss where your beneficial bacteria live, the whole colony that turns toxic fish waste into something harmless. Clean it too often and you keep knocking that colony back, which stresses the tank and, on top of it, wastes your Saturday on a job that did not need doing. The filter does not need cleaning on a schedule. It needs cleaning when the output visibly slows down, when that strong flow coming back into the tank weakens to a trickle. That is the filter physically telling you it is clogged. Until then, leave it closed. On my own tanks, I might go 2 or 3 months between filter cleanings, because I am watching the flow, not the calendar. And when I do open it up, I rinse the media in the old tank water I just pulled during the water change. Never under the tap, because the chlorine in tap water kills the bacteria. Watching the flow instead of the calendar is the difference between a filter you service 4 times a year and one you take apart every 2 weeks for no reason. That one change alone gave me back more Saturdays than everything else on this list combined. None of these are tricks in the magic sense. They are just the shortcuts you land on after enough years of doing it the hard way. Pick 3 or 4 this week: the primed hose, the baster, the light timer, the pre-aged water, whatever fits your setup, and feel how much shorter your next water change gets. The goal was never to spend your weekend serving the tank. It was to get the work down to almost nothing so you can go back to just sitting in front of it with a coffee, which is the reason any of us set one up in the first place.